The gunshot echoed through the Wyoming mountains just as Delilah Hayes pulled her washing from the creek, and she knew without question that someone needed help. She dropped the wet linens back into her basket and hiked up her skirts, running toward the sound with her heart pounding against her ribs. The year was 1878, and in these remote parts near Bandera, Wyoming, a gunshot could mean anything from a hunting accident to something far more sinister. She found him about a quarter-mile from her cabin, collapsed against a pine tree with blood soaking through his shirt. He was young, maybe 25, with fair hair matted with sweat and dirt. His breathing came in short, painful gasps. "Easy now," Delilah said, kneeling beside him. "Let me see." The stranger's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with pain. "Didn't mean to trespass," he managed to say. "Hush, that does not matter right now." She carefully peeled back his shirt to examine the wound. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder, which was fortunate, but he had lost considerable blood. "Can you walk if I help you?" "I think so." Delilah was 22 and strong from years of frontier living, but the stranger was dead weight as she half carried, half dragged him back to her cabin. By the time they reached her porch, her arms trembled with exhaustion and her dress was covered in his blood. She managed to get him inside and onto her narrow bed, then immediately set to work heating water and gathering her medical supplies. She had learned nursing from her mother, who had been the closest thing to a doctor their small community had ever had. Now, 2 years after her mother's death from fever, Delilah carried on that tradition. She cleaned the wound with whiskey, packed it with clean cloth, and wrapped his shoulder tightly. The stranger drifted in and out of consciousness through it all, occasionally crying out when she had to probe for fabric that had been driven into the wound. It was late afternoon when she finished. Delilah sat back in her chair, exhausted, and studied her patient. He seemed peaceful now, his breathing more regular. She had done all she could. The rest was up to him and the good Lord. That was when she heard the heavy footsteps on her porch. Delilah stood quickly, smoothing her blood-stained dress, and went to the door. She opened it to find the largest man she had ever seen standing there, his hand raised to knock. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sunlight. His hair was dark brown and hung past his collar, tied back with a strip of leather. His arms, visible beneath the rolled sleeves of his shirt, were corded with thick muscle. A dense beard covered the lower half of his face, but his eyes were what caught her attention. They were a startling green, and they held both intelligence and concern. "Madam," he said, his voice a deep rumble, "name is Nathan Vaughn. I have been tracking a wounded man. His trail led here." Delilah's spine stiffened. "Are you the one who shot him?" "No, madam, but I know who did." He glanced past her into the cabin. "Is he alive?" She debated lying, but something in this mountain man's steady gaze told her he would know. "He is. Barely." "Good. May I come in? I mean neither of you any harm, I give you my word." Delilah hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. Nathan Vaughn had to duck to enter her cabin, and his presence seemed to fill the entire space. He moved to the bed where the stranger lay and looked down at him, his expression unreadable. "That is Thomas Miller," Nathan said. "He witnessed a murder 3 days ago. The killer has been hunting him ever since." Delilah's hand flew to her throat. "A murder? Here?" "Up at the mining camp about 10 miles north. Miller was passing through when he saw Clayton Reeves shoot an unarmed man over a card game. Reeves is the foreman up there, and he has got enough men loyal to him that Miller could not go to the law without risking being silenced first. So he ran." Nathan turned to look at her, and she saw respect in those green eyes. "You did fine work patching him up." Not many folks would have helped a stranger, especially not with Reeves on his trail. "I could hardly leave him to die." No, I suppose you could not. He said it like he was discovering something about her, filing it away. But you have put yourself in danger now. When Reeves finds out Miller is here and alive, he will come for him, and he will not care much about who gets in his way. Delilah lifted her chin. This is my home. I will not abandon an injured man because of threats. Nathan studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. It was subtle, just a slight softening around his eyes, but it changed his entire face. Then I reckon I will be staying too, to make sure Reeves does not get past me. I do not need a protector, Mr. Vaughn. No, madam, I expect you do not. But Miller does, and since you have taken on his care, that makes you a target too. He gestured to the door. I will make camp outside. I have got supplies. I will not intrude on your home, but I will not leave you undefended either. Before she could argue further, he was gone, moving with surprising grace for such a large man. Delilah stood in her doorway and watched as he set up a simple camp about 30 yards from her cabin, near enough to respond to trouble but far enough to preserve propriety. He moved with the efficient economy of someone long accustomed to living in the wilderness, building a fire ring and stringing a tarp between two trees for shelter. She should have been frightened. Instead, she felt oddly reassured. That evening, Delilah brought Nathan a plate of beans and cornbread. He accepted it with quiet thanks and gestured for her to sit by his fire. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. How long have you lived out here alone? Nathan asked. 2 years. Since my mother died. Delilah wrapped her shawl tighter against the cooling air. She and I ran this place together after my father passed. He was a trapper, knew these mountains better than anyone. Hayes, Nathan said thoughtfully. Would that be Samuel Hayes? You knew of him. He had a reputation among the trappers and mountain men. Fair trader, honest man. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. Delilah studied him in the firelight. And you, what brings a mountain man to tracking wounded witnesses? I was at the mining camp when the murder happened. I did not see it, but I heard the shot and saw Miller running. When I asked around, folks told me what happened in hushed voices, too scared of Reeves to speak up proper. I figured somebody ought to help Miller get somewhere safe, somewhere he could tell his story to the law without getting killed first. He poked at the fire with a stick. I have seen too many men get away with murder because folks were too afraid to stand against them. It does not sit right. So you left your trap lines to help a stranger. I suppose I did. Delilah smiled. Then I would say we have something in common, Mr. Vaughn. He looked up at her, and in the dancing firelight she saw him almost smile. I suppose we do, Miss Hayes, and you can call me Nathan. Then you should call me Delilah. Over the next 3 days, a routine developed. Delilah tended to Thomas Miller, who slowly began to improve. The fever she had feared never came, and his wound showed no signs of infection. Nathan kept watch, maintaining his camp outside but never straying far. He hunted and brought back fresh meat, which he left at her door. In the evenings, Delilah would join him at his fire and they would talk. She learned that Nathan had come west 5 years ago from Missouri, seeking solitude after losing his family to cholera. He had been 20 at the time, and the grief had driven him into the mountains where he could exist in the simple rhythm of survival. He spoke little of those early years, but Delilah could see the shadows in his eyes when he mentioned his parents and younger sister. I reckon I was running from the pain, he admitted one night. Figured if I got far enough away from everything we had been, I would not hurt so much. Did it work? Delilah asked softly. Eventually. Not the way I thought it would, though. The mountains did not make me forget. They just gave me space to learn how to carry it. He looked at her. Your mother, you miss her terribly. It was not a question. Every day she was my best friend, but you stayed. You did not run. This was our place, our dream. Running would have felt like abandoning her memory. Delilah gazed up at the stars. Besides, the people around here need someone with medical knowledge. My mother taught me well. I cannot turn away from that. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. You are a rare sort of woman, Delilah Hayes. Something in his tone made her heart flutter, but before she could respond, a groan from inside the cabin called her attention. Thomas was waking, probably in pain and needing water. She excused herself and hurried inside, but Nathan's words echoed in her mind for hours afterward. On the fourth day, Thomas Miller was finally strong enough to sit up and speak clearly. He was a slight man, a clerk by trade who had been traveling through Wyoming on his way to California when he had stopped at the mining camp to earn some traveling money. I never should have played cards that night, he said weakly. I was just trying to pass the time. Then Reeves and that other fellow got into it, and before anyone could blink, Reeves had drawn his gun and shot the man dead, right there at the table. Did you tell anyone what you saw? Nathan asked. He had come inside to speak with Thomas now that he was coherent. I told the camp boss, but he is in Reeves's pocket, said it was self-defense, that the other man drew first. But that is a lie. I saw it clear as day. The man did not even have a weapon. Thomas's hands shook. The boss told me to keep quiet if I knew what was good for me. But I could not. A man was murdered. So I tried to slip away in the night, planning to ride to the next town and find a marshal. Reeves's men caught me before I made it 2 miles. They would have killed me right there, but I managed to get away in the dark. I have been running ever since. The nearest marshal is in Sheridan, Nathan said. That is 3 days' ride from here. I will never make it, not with this shoulder. Thomas looked between them desperately. Reeves will not stop. He has got too much to lose. Then we will bring the marshal here, Nathan said firmly. I will ride to Sheridan myself. You stay here with Delilah and keep healing. I will be back within a week with the law. Delilah felt her stomach drop. Nathan, that is dangerous. If Reeves has men watching the trails, you could be walking into a trap. I have been dealing with dangerous men in these mountains for 5 years. I know how to move without being seen. He looked at her, and his green eyes were intense. But I need to know you will be safe while I am gone. Can you shoot? Of course I can shoot. My father made sure of that. Good. Keep your rifle loaded and your door barred at night. If anyone comes around asking about Miller, you tell them you have not seen anyone. Do not let them inside, no matter what they say. He moved closer to her, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Promise me you will be careful. I promise if you promise the same. Nathan's bearded face softened. Deal. He left within the hour, packing light and moving out on foot rather than horseback. Delilah watched him disappear into the pine forest with a knot of worry in her chest. She had known this man for only 4 days, yet the thought of him in danger made her deeply anxious in a way she could not quite explain. The next 2 days passed slowly. Thomas continued to heal, gaining strength each day. Delilah maintained her usual routines, tending her garden, caring for her chickens, and washing clothes at the creek. But she was constantly alert, her rifle always within reach. On the 3rd evening after Nathan's departure, riders came. There were 4 of them, rough-looking men with hard eyes and weapons on their hips. Delilah saw them coming from a distance and quickly ushered Thomas into the root cellar beneath her cabin, covering the trapdoor with a rug and her kitchen table. Not a sound, she whispered to him before closing the door. She met the men on her porch, rifle in hand but pointed at the ground. Can I help you, gentlemen? The leader was a thick-set man with a scar across his cheek. We are looking for someone. Young fellow, fair-haired, traveling alone. He might be hurt. You seen anyone like that? No, I live alone out here, do not get many visitors. That's so. The man looked past her at the cabin. You mind if we take a look inside, just to be sure? Yes, I do mind. This is my property and you have no right to search it. Now, madam, we are not looking for trouble. We just need to find this fellow. He is dangerous. Killed a man up at the mining camp. Delilah's hands tightened on the rifle. If he is that dangerous, then I suggest you contact the marshal. I cannot help you. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. You are being awful protective of your privacy, madam. Makes a person wonder what you might be hiding. I am a woman alone in the wilderness. I have learned to be careful about who I trust. She raised the rifle slightly. Now I have asked you politely to leave my property. Do not make me ask again. For a tense moment, the men just stared at her. Then the leader smiled coldly. We will be on our way then, but we will be watching these parts. You see that fellow, you let us know. There is a reward. They rode off slowly, and Delilah did not lower her rifle until they were well out of sight. Then she rushed inside, her whole body shaking, and let Thomas out of the cellar. That was Reeves's men, Thomas said, his face pale. The one with the scar is his right hand, a man named Garrett. They will be back, Delilah said. They do not believe me. Nathan needs to hurry. That night she did not sleep. She sat in her rocking chair by the window, rifle across her lap, watching the darkness for any sign of movement. Thomas slept fitfully on the bed, occasionally crying out from pain or nightmares. Dawn came with no further trouble, but Delilah felt exhausted and on edge. She made coffee and forced herself to eat, knowing she needed her strength. Then she went about her morning chores, but she could not shake the feeling of being watched. She was right to be worried. That afternoon, she saw smoke rising from the direction of the road. Someone had made camp nearby. Reeves's men were settling in to watch her. 2 more days passed in tense waiting. The men did not approach again, but they were there, visible through the trees whenever Delilah looked. It was a deliberate intimidation tactic, and it was working. She slept in snatches, always alert, always afraid they would come in the night. On the 6th day after Nathan's departure, Delilah was drawing water from her well when she heard horses approaching fast. Her heart jumped into her throat as she grabbed her rifle and ran for the cabin. But then she heard Nathan's voice calling her name, and relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. Nathan rode into the clearing with 2 other men, both wearing marshal badges. He swung down from his horse before it had fully stopped and strode toward her, his eyes scanning her face with concern. Are you all right? I saw the camp down the road. We are fine. They have been watching but have not tried anything. She could not help the way her voice shook slightly. I am glad you are back. Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, something warm and intense that made her breath catch. I made a promise, he said quietly. The marshals took charge quickly. They approached the camp where Reeves's men waited and arrested them for intimidation and conspiracy. Then, with Thomas's testimony and the statements Nathan had gathered from other miners willing to talk now that the law was involved, they rode to the mining camp to arrest Clayton Reeves. Nathan stayed behind with Delilah while this happened. She made dinner for both of them, her hands still trembling slightly from the release of tension. They ate in companionable silence at her small table. I thought about you every mile to Sheridan and back, Nathan said suddenly. Worried about whether you were safe. Whether those men would do something before I could return with help. Delilah set down her fork. I thought about you too, worried you would run into trouble on the road. I took the high passes, paths only a mountain man would know. He reached across the table and gently took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was careful. Delilah, these past days have made me realize something. I came here to help Miller because it was the right thing to do, but I stayed because of you. Her heart was pounding. Nathan. I have been alone in these mountains for 5 years by choice. I thought I preferred it that way. But then I met you, and I saw the way you helped that stranger without question. The way you stood up to armed men to protect someone you barely knew, the courage and kindness in you." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You made me remember that there is more to life than just surviving. You made me want something more." "I want something more too," Delilah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you left, I realized how empty this cabin felt without you nearby. How much I had come to depend on our evening talks, how much you what?" She met his eyes. "How much I had come to care for you." Nathan stood, pulling her up with him, and suddenly they were standing very close. He was so tall she had to tilt her head back to look at him, and the sheer size and strength of him should have been intimidating. But she felt only safe, only cherished, in the way his hands carefully held hers. "I am not good with pretty words," he said roughly. "I am just a mountain man. But I know what I feel, and what I feel for you is deeper than anything I have ever known. Even before, with my family, this is different. You are different." "You do not need pretty words," Delilah said. She reached up and touched his bearded face, feeling him lean into her palm. "I know who you are, Nathan Vaughn. You are a man of honor and strength. You are kind and protective. You are exactly what I need." He kissed her then, bending down to capture her lips with his. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he was afraid of overwhelming her. But when she wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed closer, the kiss deepened, becoming something passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Delilah. Let me stay here with you. I will provide for you, protect you, love you every day for the rest of my life." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Nathan. Yes." The marshals returned 3 days later with Clayton Reeves in chains. They brought news that several of Reeves's men had confessed to various crimes in exchange for lighter sentences, and that the mining company was cleaning house. Thomas Miller was free to continue his journey to California or to settle wherever he wished, his part in seeking justice making him a hero rather than a target. Thomas stayed with them for another week as he finished healing, and during that time, plans were made. Nathan and Delilah would be married by the circuit preacher when he came through in a month. Nathan began building an extension onto Delilah's cabin, adding a proper bedroom and a larger living space. His strength made quick work of the heavy labor, and Delilah helped where she could, the two of them working side by side in perfect harmony. Thomas left on a sunny morning, his shoulder nearly healed and his spirits high. "I will never forget what you both did for me," he said as he mounted his horse. "You saved my life, Delilah, and you got me justice, Nathan. I will always be grateful." "Just live well," Delilah told him. "That is all the thanks we need." After he rode away, Nathan pulled Delilah into his arms. "Alone at last," he murmured against her hair. "Not for long. Half the county will probably show up for our wedding." He laughed, a deep rumbling sound she had come to love. "I reckon you are right. Your mother must have helped half the folks around here at some point. They will want to see her daughter happily married." She was right. When the circuit preacher arrived 4 weeks later, it seemed like every settler, trapper, and miner within 50 miles came to witness the marriage of Delilah Hayes and Nathan Vaughn. The ceremony was held outdoors, with the mountains as their cathedral and the pine-scented air as their incense. Delilah wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit her. Nathan wore new clothes bought specially for the occasion, though he still looked every bit the mountain man with his long hair tied back and his muscular frame barely contained by the formal shirt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with such tender passion that several of the women in attendance sighed audibly. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and more food than Delilah had seen in months. But finally, the last guests departed, and Nathan carried Delilah over the threshold of their cabin. He set her down gently in the new bedroom he had built, and in the soft glow of lamplight, they became husband and wife in every sense of the word. Their lovemaking was both passionate and gentle, Nathan's strength carefully controlled so he would not hurt her. He kissed every inch of her skin, worshipped her with his hands and mouth, and when they finally joined together, Delilah felt a completeness she had never known before. This was what she had been missing, what her heart had been waiting for. Not just physical pleasure, though that was certainly present, but the deep emotional connection of two souls recognizing each other as home. Afterward they lay tangled together, Nathan's large body curled protectively around hers. "I love you, Delilah Vaughn," he whispered into her hair. "I will spend every day making sure you know it." "I love you too," she whispered back. "And I already know it. I see it in everything you do." Life settled into a wonderful rhythm after that. Nathan's knowledge of the mountains and trapping combined with Delilah's medical skills and garden made them prosperous by frontier standards. More importantly, they were happy. Nathan proved to be an attentive and devoted husband, always considerate of her needs and quick to help with any task. Delilah, in turn, created a warm and welcoming home and continued to help anyone who came to their door needing medical attention. Nathan never complained about the strangers his wife took in to nurse back to health. Instead, he often helped, using his strength to carry patients or gather firewood and water so Delilah could focus on healing. Each act of kindness she showed to others only made him love her more deeply. "You are remarkable," he told her one evening after they had successfully treated a child's broken arm. The boy's grateful parents had left with profuse thanks and a basket of fresh eggs as payment. "The way you treat everyone with such compassion, never asking for anything in return, it humbles me." "You do the same," Delilah pointed out. "Just last week you spent 3 days tracking that lost hunter and bringing him back safely. That is different. That is just wilderness skills. No, it is not different at all. It is kindness. It is caring about people." She moved into his arms. "We are alike in that way. It is one of the many reasons I love you." Their first winter together was harsh, with heavy snows that sometimes trapped them in the cabin for days at a time, but Delilah had never been happier. She and Nathan would sit by the fire, talking for hours or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. He taught her to play checkers, and she taught him to read better, patiently working through the primers her mother had kept. "I never had much schooling," Nathan admitted. "Left home at 15 to work, and then after the cholera, I just did not see the point anymore." "Well, there is a point now," Delilah said. "What if we have children? You will want to read to them, help them with their lessons." Nathan's eyes lit up at the mention of children. "You think about that, about having babies with me, all the time," she confessed, blushing. "Do you?" Instead of answering with words, he pulled her into his lap and kissed her until she was breathless. That night, they made love with a new intensity, both of them hoping to create the family they both wanted. Spring came with a riot of wildflowers and the return of game to the lower elevations. Nathan's trap lines had their best season yet, and Delilah's garden flourished. In May, she realized her monthly courses had not come, and a few weeks later the morning sickness confirmed what she had hoped. She was with child. Nathan's reaction was everything she could have wanted. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then immediately set her down and fussed over her like she was made of glass. "Should you be lifting that? You need to rest. Let me do that." "Nathan, I am pregnant, not broken," she said with exasperated affection. Women have been having babies and working throughout their entire existence. I will be fine." But he could not help himself. His protective nature went into overdrive, and Delilah found it both frustrating and endearing. He built her a new rocking chair with extra cushions, reinforced the cabin against any possible draft, and stockpiled enough firewood and supplies to last through 3 winters. "Our child will want for nothing," he declared. "I will make sure of it." Throughout her pregnancy, people continued to come to Delilah for medical help, and she continued to provide it with Nathan's full support. When a family of settlers arrived with a sick infant, Delilah worked through the night to bring down the baby's fever, with Nathan assisting by keeping water heated and fetching whatever supplies she needed. When the baby recovered, the mother wept with gratitude. "You are an angel," the woman said, clutching Delilah's hands. "Just someone who cares," Delilah replied. But later, in bed with Nathan's hand resting protectively on her swelling belly, she felt a deep sense of purpose. This was her calling, helping others, and she was blessed to have a husband who not only accepted it but actively supported it. Their son was born on a snowy January night in 1880, after 12 hours of labor. The midwife from the nearest settlement had come to stay with them a week earlier, and it was her capable hands that brought the baby into the world. But it was Nathan's presence that got Delilah through the pain. He stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead and murmuring encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and healthy, Nathan cut the cord with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. "A son," he whispered in awe. "We have a son." They named him Samuel, after Delilah's father, with Nathan's last name of Vaughn. He was a big baby, nearly 9 pounds, with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. Nathan was instantly besotted, spending hours just watching the baby sleep, marveling at tiny fingers and toes. "I never thought I would have this again," he confessed to Delilah one night as she nursed Samuel. "A family, people to love and protect. You have given me everything, Delilah." "We have given each other everything," she corrected. "I was so lonely before you came. Now I cannot imagine life without you." Samuel grew quickly, strong and healthy. At 6 months old, he was already trying to pull himself up, determined to move and explore. Nathan built him toys from scraps of wood, and Delilah sewed him clothes from soft fabric. They were the picture of a happy family. When Samuel was a year old, a young woman arrived at their cabin late one evening, clearly in distress. She was perhaps 19, with a bruised face and terror in her eyes. "Please," she gasped, "I need help. My husband, he has been drinking and he hurt me. I just need somewhere safe to stay tonight." Delilah did not hesitate. She brought the woman inside, fed her, and tended to her injuries while Nathan made a bed for her in the main room. The woman, whose name was Margaret, cried as she explained that her husband had always been rough, but since losing his job at the mill, the violence had gotten worse. "You cannot go back to him," Delilah said firmly. "Not if he is hurting you. I have nowhere else to go. My family disowned me when I married him." Nathan and Delilah exchanged a look. "You can stay here as long as you need," Nathan said. "We have room, and if your husband comes looking for you, he will have to go through me." Margaret stayed for 3 weeks. During that time, Delilah helped her heal physically and emotionally, while Nathan made discreet inquiries in town about work for women. He eventually found her a position as a seamstress with a widow who needed help with her business. He even accompanied Margaret to retrieve her belongings while her husband was away working, ensuring she got away safely. "Thank you both," Margaret said tearfully when she left. "You saved my life. I will never forget it." After she was gone, Nathan pulled Delilah close. "You know I love you more every time I see you help someone like that. You helped her too," Delilah pointed out. "Only because you taught me that kindness matters. Before I met you, I would have turned her away, told myself it was not my problem." He kissed her forehead. "You make me want to be a better man. You were already a good man. I just gave you a reason to show it more often." Life continued in this way, with the Vaughn family becoming known throughout the region for their generosity and willingness to help anyone in need. Delilah treated the sick and injured, Nathan helped travelers and those in trouble, and together they raised their son to understand the importance of compassion. When Samuel was 3, Delilah became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Nathan was just as protective but slightly less frantic, though he still did everything in his power to make her comfortable. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1883, an easy birth that lasted only 4 hours. They named her Grace, and she was as beautiful as her name suggested, with her father's green eyes and her mother's delicate features. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her and making her laugh with his antics. Nathan was in his glory, surrounded by his family. At 32, he had filled out even more, his shoulders impossibly broad and his arms thick with muscle from years of hard work. But his strength was always tempered with gentleness, especially with his children. He was patient and loving, teaching Samuel to track and hunt while also encouraging the boy's softer side. "A real man is not afraid to be gentle," he told his son. "Strength is about protecting those weaker than you, not hurting them. You remember that." As the years passed, the Vaughn family grew in love and prosperity. Nathan's trapping business expanded, and he began guiding hunting parties in the fall, his reputation for knowing the mountains unsurpassed. Delilah continued her healing work, training under the occasional visiting doctor to improve her skills. She delivered babies, set broken bones, and once even performed an emergency surgery to remove an infected appendix, saving a man's life. The cabin expanded multiple times to accommodate their growing family. When Grace was 4, Delilah gave birth to twin boys whom they named James and Joseph. The twins were a handful, always getting into mischief, but they filled the house with laughter. Nathan built them all separate bedrooms, along with a large common room where the family could gather. Samuel grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father but with his mother's kind heart. At 15, he announced his intention to become a doctor, inspired by watching his mother help so many people. Nathan and Delilah were immensely proud and began saving money to send him to medical school back east when he was old enough. Grace, at 12, showed an interest in teaching. She was patient with her younger brothers and loved books almost as much as she loved horses. Nathan taught her to ride like he taught all his children, and she could outride many of the boys in the area. The twins, at 8, were still young enough that their futures were uncertain, but they showed promise. James had his father's skill with animals and tracking, while Joseph had a gift for working with wood and building things. Through it all, Nathan and Delilah's love only grew deeper. They had been married for 16 years, and not a day went by that Nathan did not thank whatever force had led him to Delilah's clearing that day. She was his anchor, his home, his reason for everything. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset while their children played in the yard, Nathan took Delilah's hand. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked. "Of course. You came looking for Thomas Miller. I thought you might be dangerous at first. I thought you were the bravest woman I had ever seen, standing there covered in blood but still defiant." He smiled at the memory. "I knew right then that you were special. And then I watched you care for that stranger with such dedication, and I watched you face down those armed men without flinching, and I fell in love with you." "It was your kindness that made me love you," Delilah said. "The way you tracked Miller just to help him, the way you protected us, the way you supported my work even though it meant strangers constantly coming through our home. You never made me choose between you and my calling." "Why would I? Your calling is part of who you are. I love all of you, Delilah." He pulled her closer. "You made me believe in family again, in love, in a future worth having. Everything good in my life came from you." "And everything good in mine came from you," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "We found each other when we both needed it most. That is not coincidence. That is fate." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Samuel was teaching Grace how to skip stones in the creek, while the twins chased fireflies. It was a perfect moment, one of thousands they had shared and would continue to share. That night, after the children were in bed, Nathan made love to his wife with the same passion and tenderness he always had. At 38, he was still incredibly strong, his body honed by years of mountain living. But it was the way he looked at Delilah with absolute adoration and devotion that made her feel truly cherished. "I will never stop loving you," he whispered against her skin. "Never stop being grateful that you chose me." "Always you," she whispered back. "Only you." More years passed in contentment. Samuel went off to medical school in Philadelphia at 18, promising to return and set up practice in Wyoming when he graduated. The family missed him terribly, but they were proud of him for pursuing his dreams. Grace became a schoolteacher at 16, teaching the children of settlers and miners in the growing community around Bandera. She lived at home still, riding to the schoolhouse each morning and returning each evening with stories of her students. The twins, now 15, were apprenticing with their father, learning the skills of trapping and guiding. They had grown into strapping young men, tall and broad-shouldered like Nathan, but with their mother's gray eyes and quick smiles. Nathan, at 44, had finally allowed some silver to show in his dark hair and beard, though he was still as strong as ever. He and Delilah had been married for 21 years, and people often remarked on how they still acted like newlyweds, always finding excuses to touch each other, always exchanging private smiles. One afternoon, as Delilah was tending her herb garden, she saw a familiar figure riding up the path. Her heart leaped with joy as she recognized her eldest son. "Samuel!" she cried, running to meet him. He had filled out during his years away, no longer the lanky boy who had left but a confident young man of 23. But his smile was the same as he dismounted and swept his mother into a hug. "I am home, Mama, for good." Nathan came running from the barn, alerted by Delilah's cry, and father and son embraced heartily. "You are done with school, graduated top of my class," Samuel said proudly. "Dr. Samuel Vaughn at your service. And I am ready to set up practice here, if the community will have me." The community welcomed him with open arms. Samuel built a small office next to his parents' cabin and began seeing patients almost immediately. He and his mother often worked together, combining her years of practical experience with his formal medical training. It was everything Delilah had dreamed of. Samuel also brought news. He had met a young woman in Philadelphia, the daughter of one of his professors. Her name was Emily, and they were in love. She would be arriving in a few months to see if she could adapt to Western life, and if so, they planned to marry. Emily arrived in the summer, a petite blonde with an adventurous spirit and a warm laugh. She fell in love with Wyoming immediately, and the Vaughn family welcomed her with open arms. The wedding was held in the fall, another joyous celebration that brought the community together. Grace married the following year, at 19, to a local rancher named William Harris. He was a good man, hardworking and kind, and Nathan approved of him immediately. "He will take care of her," Nathan said at the wedding, though his eyes were damp. "Our little girl." "She will always be our little girl," Delilah agreed, wiping her own tears. "But she is a woman now, starting her own family. That is what we raised her for." The twins married as well, within a year of each other. James wed a rancher's daughter and started his own guiding business, while Joseph married a girl from town and set up a furniture-making shop. The Vaughn family was thriving, spreading throughout the region but always staying close. Nathan and Delilah became grandparents multiple times over. Samuel and Emily had 3 children. Grace and William had 4. The twins each had 2. The cabin that had once been small and lonely was now the center of a large, loving family that gathered for holidays and celebrations. Through it all, Nathan and Delilah remained devoted to each other and to their practice of helping others. They were known far and wide as people you could count on in times of trouble. Nathan, now in his 50s but still strong, continued to help anyone who needed it, whether that was tracking a lost child or helping a family build a barn. Delilah, whose healing skills were legendary, never turned anyone away. One winter evening when Nathan was 56 and Delilah was 54, they sat together by the fire as they had done thousands of times before. Their children were grown and living their own lives, though they visited often. The cabin was quiet, just the 2 of them again after so many years of noise and activity. "You miss it?" Nathan asked. "When the house was full of children." "Sometimes," Delilah admitted, "but I also treasure this, just us, where it all started." "Where it all started was with you helping a stranger," Nathan reminded her. "If you had not done that, I never would have had a reason to stay. We never would have found each other." "I think we would have found each other eventually," Delilah said. "Some things are meant to be. But I am grateful it happened the way it did. Your kindness in helping Thomas, my choice to heal him, everything that followed, it was all perfect." Nathan pulled her close, and she curled against his chest, still fitting there as perfectly as she had the first time he held her. "I love you more now than I did the day we married," he said. "And I loved you pretty fiercely even then. I love you more too. Every act of kindness I see you perform, every time you support my work, every moment you choose gentleness over hardness, I fall more in love with you." She tilted her head up to kiss him. "You are the best man I have ever known, Nathan Vaughn, and I am so grateful you are mine." They made love that night with the slow, deep passion of long familiarity, each knowing exactly how to please the other. Age had not diminished their desire for each other, only made it richer and more meaningful. The years continued to pass gently. Nathan's hair and beard went completely silver, though he remained strong well into his 60s. Delilah's dark hair gained threads of white, and her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. But she was still beautiful to Nathan, still the woman who had captured his heart all those years ago by showing kindness to a stranger. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. It was a grand affair, with half the county showing up to honor the couple who had touched so many lives with their generosity and compassion. Samuel gave a speech, talking about how his parents had taught him the importance of service to others. Grace spoke about her father's gentle strength and her mother's unwavering kindness. The twins shared funny stories about growing up with parents who were always taking in strays, both human and animal. But it was Thomas Miller's grandson who surprised everyone. He had traveled from California specifically for the anniversary, bringing a letter his grandfather had written before he died. In it, Thomas recounted how Nathan and Delilah had saved his life, and how their kindness had inspired him to live a life of service as well. He had become a lawyer who specialized in helping those who could not afford proper representation, and he credited the Vaughns with showing him what truly mattered in life. "My grandfather never forgot what you did for him," the young man said, "and neither will our family. You started a ripple of kindness that continues to spread." Delilah wept as Nathan held her, both of them overwhelmed by the realization of how much their simple choice to help a stranger had mattered, not just for Thomas, but for everyone they had touched over the years. That night, alone again in their cabin, Nathan and Delilah reflected on their life together. "We did good, did we not?" Nathan asked. "We did very good," Delilah agreed. "We raised wonderful children. We helped countless people. We built a life full of love and meaning." "And we did it together," Nathan said. "That is the important part. I could not have done any of it without you, nor I without you." She squeezed his hand. "We were always meant to be partners, in everything." They lived many more happy years, remaining active and engaged with their community well into their 70s. Nathan finally slowed down when a bad winter gave him pneumonia at 73, and though he recovered, he was never quite as strong afterward. Delilah cared for him tenderly, reversing the roles they had played for so long. "You have spent your whole life taking care of others," she told him when he protested that he should be taking care of her. "Let me take care of you now." Nathan finally relented, allowing himself to be cared for. He spent his days in his favorite chair by the window, watching the mountains he had loved for so long, with Delilah always nearby. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the cabin with life and laughter. Samuel, now a respected doctor with gray in his own hair, checked on his father regularly. "His heart is weakening," he told Delilah privately, "but he is comfortable. That is what matters." Delilah knew. She had seen enough death in her life to recognize its approach, but she was not afraid. She and Nathan had lived a long, full life together. They had loved deeply and been deeply loved in return. When the time came, they would face it as they had faced everything else together. On a quiet spring morning when Nathan was 76 and Delilah was 74, he woke her early. "Come watch the sunrise with me," he said. They wrapped themselves in blankets and sat on the porch they had shared for so many years. The mountains were painted gold and pink by the rising sun, and birds sang their morning songs. It was peaceful and perfect. "Thank you," Nathan said softly, his hand finding hers as it always did. "For what?" "For everything. For saving Thomas and giving me a reason to stay, for loving me, for building this life with me, for every moment of the past 52 years. He turned to look at her, his green eyes still clear and full of love despite his age. "You are the greatest gift I have ever received, Delilah Vaughn, and I will love you beyond this life and into whatever comes after." Tears streamed down Delilah's face. "And I will love you just as long. You gave me everything I ever wanted, a partner, a family, a life of meaning. You supported my calling and never tried to change who I was. You were my perfect match in every way." They sat together as the sun rose fully, bathing them in warm light. Nathan's breathing was labored but peaceful, and Delilah held his hand tightly, giving him her strength as he had given her his for so many years. "The mountains are beautiful this morning," Nathan murmured. "They are always beautiful, like you." He smiled at that. "I was never beautiful. That was always you. You were beautiful to me from that very first day, my mountain man, my protector, my love." Nathan closed his eyes, still smiling. "My kind, generous, remarkable Delilah, I will find you again. Somehow, somewhere I will find you again. I will be waiting," she promised. His hand squeezed hers one last time, and then he was gone, slipping away as peacefully as falling asleep. Delilah sat with him for a long while, tears falling but her heart at peace. They had had a beautiful life together. They had loved fully and deeply. And she would carry that love with her for whatever time she had left. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Nathan had touched. Person after person shared stories of how he had helped them, protected them, shown them kindness when they needed it most. Delilah listened to it all with pride, knowing that the mountain man she had loved had made such a positive impact on the world. She lived another 4 years after Nathan passed, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Samuel moved back into the cabin to care for her, and she spent her days much as Nathan had, watching the mountains and remembering. She continued to offer medical advice to those who sought her out, though her hands were too shaky now for most procedures. On her deathbed at 78, with all her children gathered around her, Delilah's last words were about Nathan. "Tell him I am coming," she whispered. "Tell him I kept my promise. I am ready to be with him again." Grace, weeping, leaned close. "We will tell him, Mama, we will tell him." Delilah smiled and closed her eyes, and like Nathan before her, she slipped away peacefully. The love story that had begun with an act of kindness to a wounded stranger had finally come full circle. But the legacy they left behind continued through their children, grandchildren, and all the lives they had touched. In the years that followed, the Vaughn name became synonymous with compassion and service in Wyoming. Samuel continued his medical practice until he was old, and his children followed in his footsteps. Grace's children became teachers and community leaders. The twins' descendants became guides and craftsmen, known for their skill and integrity. And every generation told the story of Nathan and Delilah, of how they had met because of Delilah's kindness to a stranger, and how that kindness had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime. They told of Nathan's strength and gentleness, of Delilah's healing touch and generous heart, of how they had built a family and a legacy based on helping others. The cabin itself became a landmark, preserved by the family and eventually donated to the state as a historical site. Visitors came from all over to see where the legendary Nathan and Delilah Vaughn had lived and loved. They walked through the rooms, saw the furniture Nathan had built and the herb garden Delilah had tended, and they left inspired to show more kindness in their own lives. Because that was the true legacy of Nathan and Delilah Vaughn. Not just the children they raised or the people they directly helped, but the idea that kindness matters, that helping strangers can change lives, that love built on mutual respect and shared values can endure anything. That strength is best used in service of others, not domination of them. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived in Wyoming, carrying on the family traditions. Some were doctors, continuing the healing work Delilah had started. Some were wilderness guides, honoring Nathan's knowledge of the mountains. All of them understood that they came from something special, a love story that had begun with compassion and grown into something legendary. And on quiet spring mornings, when the sun rose over the Wyoming mountains and painted them gold and pink, it was easy to imagine Nathan and Delilah sitting on their porch together, holding hands and watching the beauty unfold. Their bodies might have been gone, but their love remained, woven into the very fabric of the land they had called home. A testament to the truth that kindness matters, that love endures, and that the choices we make to help others can create ripples that last for generations. The end.